Welcome to part 4 of this series of tutorials about book folding. In this last part of the tutorial, you will find hints to speed up the process of creating your unique books. Here, you will also find suggestions which method to choose depending on the dimensions of the book you want to use for your project. The most basic way to optimize your work is to apply one step to all sheets and then move to the next step starting from the beginning of your book, rather than applying all steps and then moving to the next sheet. Drawing lines in the first step can be sped up by applying marks on the head and tail of the book in the appropriate places. This will eliminate the process of measuring the depth of the lines. Now we only have to make sure that the edge of the ruler aligns both with the mark on the head and on the tail of the book. If you do not have any preferences about where the background or pattern starts, you can choose the depth of the first line according to how broad your ruler is or whatever tool you are using. This will help you to avoid having to measure the depth of the first line each time. Instead, you can align one edge of your ruler with the book's foredge and draw the line along the second edge of the ruler. Just to remind you, the first line is necessary to know how deep you need to cut in the next step. In order to avoid drawing the first line, you can use the book's margin instead and cut until the text starts. This may help you save time. However, this may produce a less precise outcome. The margin doesn't always end at the same depth, and you may have marks which are high or low on the page, where the side margin intersects with the top and bottom margins, and there will be no text to serve as a reference. Another special case in which you can avoid measuring the depth of one of the two lines or completely skip drawing it is when you decide the line to be in the middle of the book. Then you can bend your sheet such that its edge is aligned with the opposite edge. You will need to press the sheet to obtain a line where it is folded. However, this method is not always recommended and may also lead to imprecise results. Some pages may be glued more or less to the spine than others, and therefore the length from the foredge to the place where they are glued or threaded to one another may differ from page to page. That means that the line created after folding a sheet in half may be in a different spot from the foredge in different sheets. This is also not always recommended for thick books or books with thick sheets. The deeper your first line is, the more your book will be opened when using methods 1 or 2. This is not always the desired effect, because not all patterns will look good if they are too broad. In this example, the first line has been drawn at half the book's width. The book has only 156 pages, but the pages are thick. We can see that the book is wide opened and the pattern is elongated. To avoid measuring both lines each time, you can strongly press your pencil while drawing the lines. If you do that, you will be able to see the impression of the line on the next sheet. The last hint how you can avoid drawing the first line is to use a big rubber band. You need to place it such that it will be aligned with the first line. This needs a bit of practice on how to change the pages without moving the position of the rubber band. You should also make sure that the rubber band is still in the right place from time to time. For that, it will be helpful to draw marks on the top and bottom edge of your book as mentioned earlier. With this method, you will need to mark and cut before moving to the next page. The depth of the second line is correlated with the first one, and therefore it is more restricted. Apart from marking the places where the second line should start, at the top and bottom end of your book, you can use another ruler with the appropriate width, and use it to avoid measuring the depth of this line each time. Depending on the width of the ruler, you may align it with the foredge or with the first line. For less complicated patterns, you may skip the step of drawing the second line completely and only use marks at the head and tail of the book as demonstrated in the video. Here, the pattern parts are folded as much as the cut allows. In order to fold the top and bottom background parts in the right place, you can use the marks at the head and tail respectively. To fold the middle background part correctly, you can use the ruler. As we already mentioned in our previous videos, using the pattern picture for marking is usually faster than using the table. You can additionally speed up the process by putting this pattern picture not directly under the sheet you want to mark, but a few sheets further, and only inserting the pattern picture deeper, thereby moving to the next stripes to apply to the next sheet. But do not exaggerate and don't put the pattern picture too many pages below the starting one. It may result in very inaccurate marks. If you are certain that you can precisely cut the straight perpendicular lines, you may skip the step of drawing perpendicular lines between the foredge and the first line in places where the marks are applied. If the font in the book you use is small, it can also help you to keep straight lines by following the letters. It is important that the cuts are straight. Otherwise, the folded pattern and background parts will overlap, and that will disturb your result. If the folded parts overlap, correct it by cutting out the overlapping piece. Our last hint to speed up the project is to use a sharp knife with a cutting board. The cutting process may be faster using them instead of scissors, especially for method 3 and 4 when you have to cut out large pieces. The cutting board needs to be placed under the current sheet to not cut out parts of the next sheets. The time spent on a project will mostly depend on the number of pattern details and the number of pages. Folded books created with methods 1 and 2, described in part 1 and 2 of this tutorial, present great for every pattern. Nevertheless, remember to use a low depth for the first line if you use a thick book, otherwise the results may be broader than expected. Methods 3 and 4, described in part 3 of the tutorial, are especially great for thick books and books which you still want to read. If the first line is within the book's margin, the book will still be readable. This may be an idea for an original way of decorating a book which you want to give as a present, or one which you may still want to read in the future. If you have your own way to speed up the process of creating a folded book using our methods, please share them with us in the comment section. The first 10 good suggestions will get the Classical Art Digital instructions for the pattern used in this tutorial for free. Be creative and mark, cut and fold and enjoy your book with Classical Art Digital.